If you grew up feeling like nothing you did was ever good enough. If you were constantly walking on eggshells in your own home. If you found yourself as a child analyzing every facial expression, every tone of voice, every shift in mood just to figure out if it was safe to speak. This video might explain everything you've been carrying. Today we're covering the signs you were raised by a narcissist. These aren't just childhood memories. These are patterns that follow you into your adult relationships, your career, your self-worth, and the way you talk to yourself when nobody else is listening. And if several of these hit close to home, just know, none of it was your fault. Not a single bit of it. Most people who were raised by narcissistic parents don't figure it out until well into adulthood. Sometimes it takes a toxic relationship, a therapist's observation, or a random video on the internet to make everything suddenly click into place. That's because when you grow up in that environment, the dysfunction doesn't feel like dysfunction. It feels like Tuesday. It's all you've ever known. So you assume every household operates the same way. But it doesn't. And the effects of that upbringing follow you into every relationship, every job, every friendship, and every version of yourself you've tried to build. Let's get into the signs. Sign 1. You were never allowed to have feelings in a healthy household. A child's emotions are acknowledged and validated. A child cries and a parent asks what's wrong. A child gets angry and a parent helps them understand why. The emotion is met with curiosity and care. But if you were raised by a narcissist, expressing emotions was either ignored, dismissed, weaponized, or turned back around on you entirely. That you'd cry and be told you were too sensitive. You'd express that something hurt you, and suddenly you'd find yourself comforting your parent about how your pain made them feel. You'd get angry and be punished so severely for it that you learned to swallow every feeling before it even reached the surface. Over time, you didn't just bury your emotions, you lost access to them. You stopped being able to identify what you were feeling because feeling things had always been dangerous. If you still struggle as an adult to name your emotions, to cry when you probably should, or to understand why you feel numb in situations that should affect you deeply, this is likely where that started. Your emotional world was shut down before it ever had a chance to develop properly. Sign 2. Everything was a competition. Narcissistic parents are fundamentally incapable of letting their children shine without finding a way to make it about themselves. This shows up in two main ways. Either your achievements were stolen. Suddenly your parent was the reason for everything you accomplished. They sacrificed so much. They pushed you. They made it happen. Or your achievements were quietly minimized, so they never threatened the parent's sense of superiority. That you'd come home with a good grade, and instead of celebration, there'd be a comment about how someone else did better. You'd win something, and before you could even enjoy it, there was already a comparison being made. You'd share something you were proud of, and somehow by the end of the conversation, you felt smaller than when you started. This creates adults who are deeply uncomfortable receiving praise, who deflect compliments automatically, who finish a project they worked hard on and feel nothing, or worse, feel a quiet dread waiting for someone to point out everything that's wrong with it. You were trained to distrust your own success, and that training doesn't just disappear when you leave home. Sign 3. You were parentified. Parentification is one of the most damaging and least talked about effects of narcissistic parenting. It happens when a child is made to take on emotional or practical responsibilities that belong to the parent, not the child. And in narcissistic households, it is almost universal if you were the one your parent vented to about their problems. If you felt responsible for managing their emotional state. If you learned to scan their face the moment they walked in the door to assess what kind of mood they were in so you could prepare accordingly. If family conflicts somehow became your job to mediate or smooth over. If you felt, as a child, that your parent needed you more than you needed them, you were parentified. This creates adults who are exhaustingly over-responsible, who find it almost physically impossible to ask for help because needing help feels shameful or weak, who automatically take on the emotional labor in every relationship they enter, who feel a deep, gnawing guilt anytime they prioritize their own needs, because for their entire childhood, their needs were simply not part of the equation. Sign 4. Boundaries didn't exist. To a narcissistic parent, a child does not have boundaries. A child is an extension of them, a possession, a reflection, a source of supply. The concept of the child having a private inner world that belongs only to them is genuinely incomprehensible to a narcissistic parent. So your diary was read and then used against you. Your bedroom door being closed was treated as a personal offense. Your friendships were monitored and often sabotaged. Your opinions were overridden so consistently that you eventually stopped having them, at least out loud. Your body autonomy was dismissed. Even your thoughts were treated as something your parent had a right to access and control. Growing up with no boundaries doesn't just mean you struggle to set them as an adult, though you absolutely do. It means you don't even fully understand what a boundary is or why you're allowed to have one. You let people treat you in ways that don't feel good, because somewhere deep down you still believe that other people's comfort matters more than your own. You were taught that lesson before you were old enough to question it. Sign 5. Love was always conditional. This one sits at the core of almost every wound a person raised by a narcissist carries. In a narcissistic household, love is not unconditional. Love is a transaction. It is given when you perform correctly and withdrawn when you don't. It is used as a reward and a punishment. And because it comes from a parent, the person whose love a child needs more than anything else in the world, this creates a wound that runs deeper than almost anything else. You received warmth and affection when you achieved something, when you behaved in a way that made your parent look good, when you were useful to them, when you didn't cause problems. The moment you failed to meet their expectations, the moment you had needs of your own, the moment you disagreed, the moment you were simply human, the warmth disappeared. Sometimes immediately, sometimes through days of silence. But you always felt it go. As an adult, this manifests as an almost constant need for external validation. A terror of abandonment that can feel completely disproportionate to the situation you're in. A subconscious belief, no matter how much evidence exists to the contrary, that love must be earned. That if you stop being useful, agreeable, impressive, or easy, people will leave. Because for the most important person in your early life, that was exactly what happened. Sign 6. You were gaslit constantly. Gaslighting in a narcissistic household isn't occasional. It is the operating system. It is so woven into the daily fabric of life that by the time a child is old enough to question their reality, they've already been trained out of trusting it. You'd remember something happening, a cruel comment, a broken promise, an incident that genuinely hurt you, and be told it never happened, or that you misunderstood, or that you're too sensitive, or that you're making things up for attention. You'd bring up something that hurt you and find yourself somehow on the defensive within 60 seconds, apologizing for bringing it up at all. You'd feel certain about something, and then, after enough cycles of being told you were wrong, you'd start to wonder if you actually were. Over time, you stopped trusting your own memory, your own perception, your own instincts. You developed a habit of second-guessing yourself before anyone else even had the chance to. If you constantly apologize even when you've done nothing wrong, if you struggle to trust your own read on a situation, if you find yourself always assuming the other person must be right and you must be mistaken, chronic childhood gaslighting is almost certainly at the root of it. Sign 7. You were either the golden child or the scapegoat. Narcissistic parents almost always sort their children into roles, and once those roles are assigned, they are remarkably rigid. The golden child is the one who reflects the narcissist's ego back at them. They can do very little wrong. Their successes are the parents' successes. They are favored, protected, and held up. The scapegoat is the opposite. They are the child onto whom everything difficult is projected. Every family problem finds its way back to them. They are blamed, criticized, and made to feel like the source of the family's dysfunction. If you were the scapegoat, you likely grew up with a bone-deep sense of shame, a feeling that you are fundamentally different from other people in a way that makes you less than. A belief that if people really knew you, they wouldn't like what they found. You may have spent your entire childhood trying to figure out what you did wrong and how to fix it, not understanding that nothing you did caused it and nothing you did could fix it. You were not the problem. You were just the most convenient target. If you were the golden child, the wounds are different, but they are still there. You may struggle with an unrealistic pressure to always be exceptional. You may have your own narcissistic tendencies that you are only now beginning to recognize and work through. And you may carry a complicated guilt about the way your sibling was treated while you were protected. Sign 8. You struggle with your identity. When you are raised by a narcissist, you are not raised to become yourself. You are raised to become whatever the narcissist needs you to be. Your authentic self, your real interests, your actual personality, your genuine preferences, was either irrelevant or actively discouraged unless it happened to serve the parent's image or needs. So you shapeshifted. You figured out who you needed to be in order to keep the peace, earn some affection, or simply get through the day. You became an expert at reading what people wanted from you, and then becoming that. And you did it so automatically, so young, and so completely that by the time you became an adult, you had almost no idea who you actually were underneath all of it. This shows up as a chronic sense of emptiness, a feeling that everyone around you seems to have a clear sense of who they are and what they want while you're still trying to figure out your favorite color. It shows up as a chameleon-like quality in relationships. You become slightly different versions of yourself depending on who you're with. Not because you're fake, but because you never had the safety to just be one consistent, authentic person and have that be enough. Sign 9. You have a deep fear of conflict. When conflict in childhood didn't just mean disagreement, when it meant explosive rage, days of cold silence, withdrawal of love, or being made to feel like the worst person alive for simply having a different opinion, your nervous system learned something very specific. It learned that conflict equals danger, not discomfort, danger. And nervous systems that learn that lesson in childhood don't just forget it when you turn 18 and leave home. They carry it into every relationship, every workplace, every friendship. You became a people pleaser not because you are weak or spineless, but because people pleasing was a genuine survival strategy. Keeping everyone happy kept you safe. Saying yes when you meant no kept the peace. Staying silent when you should have spoken up prevented the kind of blow-up you'd spent your whole childhood dreading. The cost of this as an adult is enormous. Your real needs go unmet because you can't bring yourself to express them. Resentment builds quietly in your relationships because you keep agreeing to things that don't work for you. You lose yourself slowly in every close relationship you enter. And the worst part is that the conflict you spend so much energy avoiding almost never materializes the way you fear it will, because the person you're afraid of is no longer in the room. You're just still acting like they are. Sign 10. You feel responsible for other people's emotions. This is perhaps the most exhausting legacy of narcissistic parenting, and it quietly ruins more relationships and careers and inner lives than almost anything else on this list. If you grew up having to manage a narcissistic parent's emotional state, you became extraordinarily attuned to other people's feelings. You could read a shift in someone's mood from across a room. You could sense tension before a single word was spoken. You developed a near-constant low-level anxiety about how the people around you were feeling and whether you were somehow the cause of it. Now, as an adult, when someone near you is upset, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with you, something in you immediately assumes responsibility. You over-apologize for things that aren't your fault. You exhaust yourself trying to manage other people's emotional experiences. You find it almost impossible to be present in your own life because you're always monitoring everyone else's. And if someone is unhappy and you can't fix it, the anxiety can become overwhelming. This isn't empathy. Or rather, it started as something that looks like empathy, but was actually a survival mechanism. Real empathy is a choice. What you developed is a compulsion. And until you understand where it came from and why, it will keep running your life from the background. If several of these signs resonated with you, the most important thing I want you to take away from this video is this. The way you were raised was not a reflection of your worth. It was not a consequence of who you are or what you deserved. It was a reflection of your parents' limitations, their wounds, and their inability to see you as a separate human being with your own inner world that deserved to be protected and nurtured. You adapted. You survived. You developed strategies that kept you safe in an environment that should never have required that of a child. Those strategies made sense then. Some of them are causing you real pain now. But recognizing them, really seeing them clearly for the first time, is where everything starts to change. Healing from a narcissistic upbringing is not quick, and it is not linear. But it is absolutely possible. People do it every day. They learn to set boundaries without guilt. They learn to trust their own perception again. They learn that love doesn't have to be earned and conflict doesn't have to be catastrophic, and their needs are not an inconvenience. They build the life and the relationships that their childhood never prepared them for, and they do it anyway. If this video helped you understand yourself a little better, please subscribe. There is a lot more content coming that I think will help. And if you want to keep going right now, watch this video next.